Good morning, it is I, the Bleach Demon. And as you can tell by the introduction of this Setting Right the Erudite, this is a rebuttal piece for Thomas Dowling's The Secret Purpose of Anti-Communism, which is a premium article on the Lotus Eaters. I would encourage you to take a look at it in any way, shape, or form that you can. I have valued the opinions of the Lotus Eaters for quite a while, although with articles like this and a few others, I'm starting to lose a lot of respect for the individuals there, especially Thomas Dowling. Unfortunately, I think he is an intelligent man, but unfortunately, his ego or academia has tainted his view on those who he should consider allies for the cause of the intellectual right as well as the general right, the right of the everyman, which I've given my ideas of why the philosophical right has failed earlier because, well, their ideas are more obsessed about making themselves seem more intelligent rather than effective results on the ground. And I think his article, which again, go to lotuseaters.com and read it, is something where you really should dive into it, read it, and honestly, if you're like me, walk away and become rather disgusted by it. Because the entire article is basically, unless you are of the correct intellectual caliber, you're not welcome. And the last time we've heard you are not welcome, I believe that would have been former Governor Andrew Cuomo of fuck New York. Now, this entire article is very pointed at Thomas. I think he has a lot to learn. I think he needs to mature his thoughts. So I want to make it clear, while I do engage in some coarseness and hyperbole, this is not meant as a direct personal attack, but undoubtedly he will take it as such, especially because I'm an American, therefore I must be an idiot. So, to get the point across a little more acceptable to specific audiences, I decided that I would enlist what I call Robo-Crow 3000. Now, Robo-Crow 3000 is using the 11 Labs AI cloning technology, which I have gotten permission from Mr. Jonathan Crow to use his a synthesized version of his voice for this article. He was rather amused by it, so I want to ensure that everyone knows these are words that I have put in the AI's mouth rather than the words of Mr. Crow himself. So without further ado, I would like to introduce you to Robo-Crow 3000, the most memeiest of memes, and we're off.
A rebuttal of Thomas Dowling's The Secret Purpose of Anti-Communism, or Setting Right the Erudite. Why is the sensible centrist considered still part of the conservative movement? Thomas, who, pray tell, is to determine the big boys' table. Is the right to bow to the political establishment or academia to determine who should be the thought leader, rather than let those ideas form organically? Rather than discarding the audience who have brought you to prominence, engaging them and cultivating them would be far better. This disdain you have laid bare for an audience from who you have sought succor spells nothing but doom for the intellectual right. Carl's legacy audience is a necessary reaction to the petty insults hurled from the left, who have successfully cultivated their radicals into sheepdogs to herd the left toward orthodoxy. To believe that the only way to advance the ideas of the right is to slit the throat of those who have supported you in the darkest hours is Machiavellian at best and Operation Hummingbird at worst. Perhaps communism isn't the spectre it once was. The progressive ideology that shared the same teat is as much of a threat as it was in 1912. The foolhardy belief that any system that embeds itself into institutions is no longer a threat need only look to history, if one can move past hubris. Thomas, you blithely point to this as American culture. It is as specious a claim as saying Telford is an exemplar of Britishness. Perhaps you could be forgiven to hold such cloistered views of American culture as pop culture is as virulent as COVID, but let us not forget the Beatles or Spice Girls. Theodor Ludwig Wiesengrun's works on pop cultural standardization, from my albeit brief familiarization while accurate, should not be limited in scope to just the American product. I will not absolve America from the damage it has caused, but if the roots of the British tree are poisoned, a strong gust will undoubtedly blow it over. I am doubting that you are so ignorant to not delve into the fact that there was an internal power struggle between Stalin and others in the inner party. However, as that is inconvenient to the point you are making, let us just casually discard Soviet involvement with growing its international influence. To state that imprisoned spies such as Julius and Ethel Rosenberg were to conduct more than military espionage is foolish and ignorant. Or are active measures just figments of the imagination? Regardless, one need do no more than listen to old recordings of Radio Havana to understand why such reactionary opinions of the subversive threat that the Soviets and communist Cuba engaged in exist. You seem to only view communism through the lens of the radical revolutionary, while blindly ignoring the Fabian socialists and progressives. The idea of revolution in the Anglosphere was widely discarded in the early 20th century. While perhaps not capital C communism, it all works within the socialist framework of upending civilization for the goals of self-indulgent utopia. There were active and aggressive communist and anarchist terror groups that were regularly in the news in the US. Their propaganda of the deed led to the 1920 Wall Street bombing, which stood as the greatest loss of life to terrorism in the US until 1996. To enjoy the benefits of hindsight is sophomoric and devoid of insight. You are LARPing at intellectualism, making it seem through the reading of leftist ideologues and co-opting their framing you have the moral high ground. It is fair to want to distance yourself from the thuggish behaviours of those chanting in the streets, but to treat them with such brazen disdain shows to the everyman that the intellectual is also their enemy. You have fallen into the trap that by putting yourself in the inner party you can distance yourself from the unwashed masses. If you gave one whit about the betterment of conservatism and not philosophical masturbation, you would find ways to reach the everyman. To dismiss Carl's initial audience as overgrown children is infantile and insulting. These should be the people you engage with and educate, not treated as a beast of burden for your own goals and ego. I will not pretend to be a philosopher, as they tend to be as arrogant as they are useless, nor will I say I have delved into the various tomes upon whom you rely like a cripple. However, I will say that I am decently read and aware enough that I know going on such a puritanical purge of those dirty ruffians will only lead to disaster. Those who only value erudite ideas and not people who are impacted and burdened by the struggles of life are far worse for the cause of liberty and the preservation of the moral fabric than those who openly demonstrate against conservatism.
Thank you, RoboCrow 3000. So, as you can tell, it's a very imperfect AI, but hopefully it was able to capture my thoughts much more precisely. Now, again, this is to box Thomas around the ears and hopefully let him understand that while there are those out there who have coarse language, who are rough around the edges, maybe aren't the most well-read or educated, they definitely have value in the right. And I have gone on and on about the whole idea of the philosopher everyman, who can go out in a field and pick cotton as well as wax philosophic in the evenings. Now, is that to say I find no value in philosophy? Absolutely not. However, I think we are at a point where certain individuals want to drive a distinct and dangerous wedge between the general public, whom would have their back strongly and without reservation, but perhaps they need a little guidance, a little coercion to think on things a little more deeply than they currently do. But to throw them out to the wolves is arrogant and asinine. And I have very little respect for people who will come in and treat them, the people who brought them there, to that point, to give them a platform, who willingly indulged some of the hubris of these individuals. I just can't, I cannot sit idly by. And while I have this platform, I have done my best to not sit idly by. So, now that I've couched things in a little bit of a coddling way, I'm sure I'm going to rant about this on the Sultans of Châtelet on Saturday. But I really would encourage everyone to not let the experts, those who know more and more about less and less, drive you away from the public sphere. You're smarter than you're given credit for, typically. And while you might engage in mimology and a bit of, just having fun with it, because not everything should be so deadly serious that we forget ourselves. Because it's far more important to get rid of this puritanical urge to make everything homogenized or push it out of the way. That needs to go. That is, as I concluded in my article, far more toxic to the right than what the left is currently doing. And on that note, bleach out.